Good afternoon. My name is Isaiah Foster, and I will be presenting on lavender as a pest repellent partner plant for shore pine. Insect repellents don't always need to be a suspicious chemical or pesticide. Many of you have probably seen lavender used as an insect repellent before, specifically as an essential oil. Lavender-infused candles are a common mosquito repellent to protect your backyard cookout from uninvited guests looking for a free meal of your blood anyways. I'm so grateful for these candles. Nobody likes mosquito bites. A good amount of insects are warded off by the smell of lavender, like mosquitoes. That being said, a lot of insects we'd rather have around, like bees and other pollinators, are actually drawn to the smell. This is due to lilonyl and linalool acetate in lavender, both responsible for the plant's smell. This simultaneous attraction of pollinators and repellent of less desirable species is achieved through volatile organic compound masking. So what are volatile organic compounds? Volatile organic compounds are organic compounds that have a high vapor pressure at room temperature, meaning it readily evaporates or turns to gas. This includes lilonyl and linalool acetate. A research paper by Juan Barcelo in 2024 found that plant volatile organic compounds directly affect an insect's ability to search, locate, and select suitable host plants. Lilonyl and linalool may help mask nearby plants from insects that use volatile organic compounds to search for them. This works to some insects' advantage and others' disadvantage. A research paper from Morgan Nuven in 2015 found that when aggravated, bees' alarm pheromone was not masked by lilonyl, which suggests that its presence didn't alter their behavior, suggesting that bees are resistant to these compounds becoming overwhelming, which would have hindered their ability to pick up on other smells. As pollinators, they have likely evolved to function normally in the presence of these strong volatile organic compounds because they use them to locate flowers for pollen and nectar collection. This is not the case for insects who are not drawn to lavender for pollination. Of these susceptible species, lavender may interfere with neuronal transmission. In other words, the insect's body won't be able to function normally. When studying the effects of lilonyl on red flower beetles, a study by Pajaro Castro in 2017 found that the compound led to the overexpression of a receptor for histamine. This would create neurological problems that could make the insects spasm or become uncoordinated. It makes it difficult for the insects to control their own body. If you're looking to fix an insect problem, this is great because it will most likely kill the insect. This, combined with covering the scent of whatever a non-pollinating insect may be looking for, makes lavender a promising option for discouraging pests. That leads us into our goal. We want to determine, can lavender be used as a pest deterrent partner plant? In this case, for shore pine. And we will go about this by testing lavender's repellent properties in its plant form, by pairing it with shore pine and documenting the difference in insect population between locations with and without lavender. My hypothesis was that lavender will simultaneously deter pests while attracting pollinators. Now we're on to the methods of the project. Over the course of roughly 4 months, I watered and collected data for 4 planting locations. Shore pine, along with information and advice for how to maintain the plants, was supplied by Dr. Elliott, my mentor and a plant pathologist. And I don't know why I wrote that wrong, pathologist, we watered in 2 separate locations on Bellarmine campus, one by the north end of our track field and one by the south. This is a screenshot off of Google Earth. The blue dot represents locations with lavender, and the yellow dots represent locations without lavender. Of each pair, the trees were planted roughly 30 feet apart to allow room for their future growth, and to keep the effects of lavender contained to one tree. These locations were chosen because the conditions were very similar. The plants have almost perfectly equal sun exposure, and the soil quality is the same. By planting in separated pairs of 2, both experiencing the same conditions, it will help ensure differences in insect count isn't random. Before we could plant the trees, the immediate area had to be cleared of weeds and tall grass. Thankfully, my dad made time to come use his weed whacker to get that taken care of. We asked him to clear decently large areas around where the trees would go, which also made data collection easier later on. Once we had the space, some friends and family helped plant the shore pine and lavender. Because we planted during the summer, the trees needed special attention to remain healthy. There weren't any hoses that could reach the trees, and I couldn't visit campus every day over the summer, so we had to figure out a watering system. Miss Savage, one of Bellarmine's teachers who manages the greenhouse, recommended this method. We took 5-gallon buckets and drilled 4 or so small, roughly 3-millimeter holes into the bottoms. These were left by the trees. Then, twice a week, we would fill those buckets with water. By allowing water to gradually drain through small holes, the soil was more fully saturated, and the trees were able to absorb more water, reducing how frequently we needed to water the trees. The only downside was that we had to take other buckets, fill them with water, place them on a flat cart, and manually bring those out to the buckets to fill them. To collect day data, a visual survey was conducted around the tree with a radius of about 3 feet twice a week. We lightly shook the tree and watered the lavender to stir up insects, then counted every one we could find. If an insect was found no longer alive, then it wasn't counted, as the bug was no longer influencing or being influenced by the plants. Data on insects during the night was collected once it was fully dark out, once a week, on Fridays to be exact. A homemade light lure was set up to observe insects. It wouldn't have been easy to find them otherwise. To make the lure, a white cotton pillow sheet was draped over the side of the watering bucket so that it formed an L shape between the ground and the side of the bucket. A flashlight was propped up against a rock pointing towards the sheet so that the light attracted insects to it. The lure was left on for 10 minutes. Then, insects gathered on either side of the pillow sheet were recorded and the lure was dismantled. Now we're on to the results. Each dot on this graph is the total number of insects recorded on a given day at locations with or without lavender. When combining every species, lavender generally attracted more insects than it repelled. Pollinators much preferred to spend time at locations with lavender. The composition of insects is what we were particularly interested in, and this varied heavily between locations with and without lavender. In the far left column are the different species we collected data on. Although harvestmen, spiders, slugs, and isopods technically are not insects, we still collected data on them because of their relevance. The far right column indicates whether the species was attracted to lavender or repelled by it. In the middle column, the p-value is a way of testing to see how convincing the data we collected is. A statistically significant p-value is one of 0.05 or less, which would mean there is a 95% confidence in the data. Using Data Classroom, I found that 5 species qualified for this, those being butterflies, harvestmen, bees, spiders, and plant hoppers. Now for the discussion. As already mentioned, pollinators were very heavily drawn to lavender, particularly bees and butterflies, both of which to be expected. These graphs, with bees to the left and butterflies to the right, helps visually depict that by comparing the total number of a species present with if lavender was there or not. All the graphs I will show will have locations with lavender be represented by the dots in purple, and green or blue dots will represent without lavender. The dot off to the side with lines through it is the average number of a given insect species from its according color. The lines above and below show the margins of error, so you'll want to pay special attention to those ones. Our 2 arachnid species, spiders and harvestmen, at first glance appear to have been attracted to the lavender. While there isn't specific information on if harvestmen have any opinions on lavender, lavender has actually been thought to repel spiders, something quite different from what our data suggests. There could be a few reasons for this discrepancy. Most likely, the spiders were not overly bothered by the lavender. The majority of the spiders counted were hiding in the plant itself, suggesting that its repellent properties towards the spider is weak. The reason that spiders seem to prefer locations with lavender may stem from changes to the environment lavender provided that were not related to its scent. The lavender provided shelter, along with the attraction of prey insects. Spiders likely used this to their advantage and hung around for the food and hiding places. Slugs have also been thought to be repelled by lavender. Our data suggests that slugs are not significantly attracted to nor repelled by the plant. You'll see that the margins of error are even fully overlapping both above and below. When the slugs decided to show up, they did so in large numbers and gathered below the watering buckets. Similarly to spiders, they were interested in benefits not directly brought about by the lavender. They approved of the moisture and shelter the watering buckets provided. And because these were placed at both locations with and without lavender, they pretty equally sought out both. You may have noticed that on one day, 14 of them showed up at one location, which is a lot of slugs. I have an image here, so you may want to close your eyes for just a moment if you don't feel like seeing a whole family reunion of slugs. It's tricky, but if you tried, you could count all 14. If you were looking away, you can open your eyes now, because we're on to plant hoppers. For those of you who aren't familiar, plant hoppers are a very small insect. This species is about 1/4 of an inch long. They're usually not a problem, but they do feed on plants and can spread pathogens to them. So they sometimes pose a danger to crops and can be threatening in large amounts. These plant hoppers were nearly impossible to find during the day. At night, however, they were our most frequent and consistent guest. Plant hoppers were incredibly more abundant at locations without lavender, which suggests that they might be deterred by the plant. However, it's hard to tell because the spiders might just be eating them all. This was actually one of the major limitations to this project. Trying to keep an experiment such as this outdoors is effective when it comes to seeing how something would work in the given environment. However, it creates a lot of intertwined factors, such as how it's impossible to tell if there were less plant hoppers because of the lavender, or if there were less plant hoppers because of the spiders. There were also the limitations that come with visual surveys. It can be easy to miss such small animals. Then there was some species with particular interest, such as moths, which just didn't show up at all. The light lures were originally for moths. If plant hoppers hadn't shown up, they would have been consistently empty and there would have been no data collected at night. Our hypothesis was that lavender will deter pests while attracting pollinators. And in the end, lavender did leave a strongly positive impact on the composition of insects present. Pollinators were heavily drawn to it. However, it wasn't particularly promising in deterring pests. Lavender plantings tended to yield results quite different from studies using lavender extract, such as how slugs, who are meant to be repelled by lavender, did not lean one way or the other. And although not pests, spiders didn't seem to mind the plant much either. One specific future research direction I was interested in is using lavender against varroa mites, also known as bee mites. These guys are parasites to bees and can cause big problems for bee colonies. As pollinators, bees are attracted to lavender, where bee mites dislike the smell of lavender and can even be killed by lavender essence. This suggests that lavender plantings near beehives may be a useful way to combat bee mites, less dangerous for the bees than the miticides that can cause their health to dwindle. The bees kept on Bellarmine campus have struggled with bee mites. Just last year, a different marine chemistry student studied the use of formic acid and oregano oil against bee mites. A combination of these projects to study lavender planting's impact may yield interesting results. I'd like to give a huge thank you to Dr. Elliott, who is a plant pathologist, by the way. I don't know why I started panicking there. Mr. DeGroot, Ms. Savage, and all of my friends and family who have helped me along the way with this project, and all of the marine chemistry class of 2025. It's been an incredible honor working with all of you. Here are my works cited, and any questions? The question, correct me if I'm wrong, was what kind of lavender did I use, and was it blue? Oh, in bloom. Yes, it was in bloom. I actually don't remember the specific type of lavender. I'd have to double check that. Sorry about that. Yes?
Why did you pick shore pine?
Shore pine, I wanted to use something that could be partnered up with lavender, and they both are pretty tolerant of similar like acidity or like alkalineness in the soil. Shore pine also doesn't like have particularly strong attraction or repellent properties to insects, so I wasn't overly concerned about that interfering with lavender's effect on the location. Any other questions? Oh, yes, Brad?
I was wondering, why did you go with a natural outside environment rather than a sterilized one?
The question is, why did I go with an outdoor environment rather than a more like controlled indoor environment? The reason was I kind of wanted to get trees planted on Bellarmine campus back in that area, so it was a fun use for that, good for the environment. But also because for experiments like this, it's kind of cool to see how they would play out in use or in nature. If I used like indoors to get a more accurate reading on like whether or not the insect truly liked lavender, it would have been a bit harder to see how it would play out in nature. Yes? Yeah, the question was, were there any other insects that were here that I didn't really talk about? And actually there were a few. We did see, I cut a lot of them actually. There was like 2 moths I saw total, so I just didn't include them because there's only 2 of them over like 15 different days. And then there was also an ant colony that was at one of the planting locations, but after it was disturbed, it moved out after like a day. Or I just didn't see any ants afterwards, so I decided not to include that either. Yeah?
How is the shore pine and the lavender doing right now?
Right now, the question was, how are the shore pine and the lavender doing right now? And surprisingly well. Lavender was supposed to be out of bloom a while ago, but it was blooming a little bit past that date, which could have just been random. And the shore pine is also is pretty healthy. All right, if there's no more questions, then we are going to take like a 5 to 7 minute break now for everyone to get up and stretch their legs. We also have some snacks around back, and then we'll be back to it in a little bit.